Welcome to the Genie Journal Recap, your monthly update on the regulatory, financial, and operational shifts shaping medical transportation. We track the headlines so you don't have to, and explain what they mean for providers, brokers, and healthcare stakeholders.
Here's a recap of what mattered at the start of 2026.
We begin with the medical transportation market outlook, and the signal here is clearly positive. According to Research and Markets' January 2026 forecast, the global non-emergency medical transportation market is valued at approximately $18.2 billion in 2026 and is projected to reach about $25.4 billion by 2032. That represents roughly 5.5% annual growth. For the industry, this confirms a broader shift already underway. Medical transportation is increasingly viewed as core healthcare infrastructure. Investment is flowing towards scheduling technology, fleet visibility, and compliance-ready operations. Despite the positive outlook for NEMT, there are some pressures building up within Medicare. In 2026, Medicare Advantage is entering its first enrollment contraction in nearly 2 decades. Data from CMS and KFF shows insurers are pulling back from unprofitable markets and benefits. One visible result is transportation coverage. The share of individual Medicare Advantage enrollees with routine ambulatory transportation benefits fell from 30% in 2025 to 24% in 2026. This does not mean transportation demand is disappearing. It means Medicare transportation is becoming more selective, with higher acuity trips, stronger documentation, and tighter utilization controls determining which providers remain essential. Maryland illustrates how disruptive these shifts can be. Maryland Matters reports that roughly 100,000 Medicare beneficiaries faced plan exits or major changes heading into 2026. For NEMT operators, this kind of churn creates eligibility confusion, last-minute trip changes, and unstable schedules. Another Medicare development directly affects operational workflows. Morningstar reports that more than 6 million Medicare beneficiaries will now be subject to AI-driven prior authorization for 17 procedures. While this targets clinical services, it can ripple into transportation by extending confirmation timelines, increasing reschedules, and tightening documentation tied to appointments. Medicaid developments, however, show that policy pressure does not move in only one direction. Against the backdrop, there is also contrasting news from North Carolina. North Carolina Medicaid announced that it reversed a 3% NEMT rate reduction from late 2025 and is issuing retroactive adjustments, according to an official update from the state's DHHSS Medicaid program. Taken together, these developments highlight the dual reality facing Medicaid transportation today: tighter oversight on one hand and policy course corrections on the other. All of this feeds into heightened focus on brokers and network stability. According to Business Wire, Modivcare has successfully emerged from Chapter 11 bankruptcy after reducing funded debt by more than 85%, roughly $1.1 billion, and securing $100 million in new capital. Debt was converted into equity, and operations continued throughout the restructuring. So Modivcare is out of bankruptcy. However, scrutiny remains intense. Maine Public Radio reports that more than 100 Maine lawmakers signed a bipartisan letter urging Governor Janet Mills to terminate the state's $750 million MaineCare NEMT contract with Modivcare and reopen the bidding process. Lawmakers cited service complaints and concerns that recent financial instability poses risks to the state's transportation infrastructure. For providers, the message is consistent. Even after restructuring, broker financial health and service performance remain under close political and regulatory watch, and rebids can follow quickly. Beyond policy and oversight, technology is continuing to reshape the transportation landscape. That brings us to the growing role autonomous vehicles could play in the future of medical transportation. On January 9th, Uber and Lyft drivers protested outside the California Public Utilities Commission over the expansion of Waymo robotaxis in San Francisco, according to Associated Press. Drivers argue that autonomous fleets are not held to the same licensing, safety, and enforcement enforcement standards as human drivers. While the drivers are resisting the shift, the corporations they work for are actually moving ahead with the adoption of autonomous vehicles. Starting January 13th, Waymo autonomous vehicles are now live on the Uber app across Austin, Texas, operating 24/7 across a 133 square mile area. Riders pay the same price as UberX or Uber Comfort and must opt in to accept an autonomous ride. Lyft is moving in the same direction, launching autonomous ride pilot programs with May Mobility in Atlanta, with plans to expand service over time. Why this matters for medical transportation. Autonomous vehicles are moving from the testing stage to real-life implementation. Regulators are setting rules now, and those decisions will shape if and how autonomous fleets ever enter ambulatory NEMT. Now we pivot towards broker transitions and new integrations of the major NEMT players. United Healthcare Community Plan of Texas announced that Safe Ride Health became its NEMT broker effective January 1, 2026, changing reservation lead times and operational rules statewide. United Healthcare Community Plan of Nebraska also announced that MTM Health will manage NEMT services starting January 1, 2026, with trip scheduling opening in December. The update includes new notice requirements, pickup timeframes, and workflow expectations. For providers, these changes matter because broker transitions often reset operating rules overnight, even when overall trip volume remains stable. Now let's get to the integration spotlight. We're happy to announce the RouteGenie integration with ProviderRide, a national broker serving managed care organizations and state Medicaid agencies. As ProviderRide President Alan Grodel noted, the NEMT industry is at an inflection point where data integration and operational transparency are no longer optional. For transportation partners, this integration means smoother data flow, clearer operational visibility, and better alignment between brokers and fleets. Trips, reporting, and workflows stay synchronized, reducing administrative friction and supporting consistent service delivery. And finally, some news from the North. There is a notable policy update out of Canada. The First Nations Health Authority in British Columbia announced changes to its medical transportation benefit for patients receiving frequent cancer and dialysis treatment. Approved clients can now submit a provider-issued treatment plan outlining appointment frequency rather than confirming attendance for every trip, with updates required every 3 months. For medical transportation providers, this reduces administrative friction, speeds reimbursement, and improves reliability for patients who depend on recurring care, particularly in rural and remote communities. It is a reminder that while oversight is tightening in many systems, some payers are also simplifying rules to protect access and continuity of care. Here's this month's takeaway. The NEMT market is growing, but it is also becoming more selective, more regulated, and more performance-driven. Medicare Advantage contraction, AI-driven authorization, broker restructuring, rebids, and fraud scrutiny all point in the same direction. Operational control, documentation quality, and transparency are now table stakes. This is it for the first ever Genie Journal Recap. If you found this video helpful, give us a like and subscribe to our channel not to miss the upcoming reports. You can find all of the links to the news sources in the description. For deeper analysis and source links, visit the RouteGenie blog. See you next time.